Jake and I have been having a meaningful, deep-seated, soulful conversation about Oregon head football coach Dan Lanning. And I've been asking for 2 days now, and nobody seems to have the answer. What is the brilliance of Dan Lanning having 12 guys on the field with 10 seconds to go? And if you didn't see it, Oregon, Ohio State, well, apparently you did see it because apparently everybody saw it.
Yeah.
The ratings were massive for
10 million views
for Oregon, Ohio State.
Yeah. Big time football.
They're coming down with an opportunity to kick a field goal to win the game. There's 10 seconds left. And Oregon puts a 12th man on the field. Ooh, it's intentional. Man, Dan Lanning is brilliant. He's amazing. Dan Lanning's my hero. What impact did that have on the game? It had one impact. And that is you had triple coverage on one of the best wide receivers, Jeremiah Smith, in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That ultimately, I think that's the impact. For one snap. And I don't understand, how is that brilliant? How is that amazing? How is that groundbreaking? I don't get it. And I don't understand today, why is everybody lauding Dan Lanning as just, I mean, wow. Jake, I've never seen, we have seen people do that before. And I just don't think it's amazing. I think we've even talked about this on the show. If you intentionally take a penalty with under a minute left in the game, I believe it should be a 15-yard penalty. There's no doubt in my mind that you have to legislate that out of the game.
Well, I think it's hard to prove in the moment whether it was intentional or not live in the game. But what I do think is that when you have too many men on the field, it's got to be more of a penalty than
under a minute left.
Yeah.
When you take a penalty, especially on defense, it needs to be much more severe. I think that's a 5-yard penalty. You need to put the time back on the clock, and you need to either have it be an automatic. See, at that point, though, making it an automatic first down doesn't matter.
Right.
Because there's under 10 seconds to go.
The play initiated on the 43 and finished at the 38, I think it was. And then when Will Howard ran the game out there, I think he was sitting on like the 33-yard line or something.
So if it's a 10-yard penalty, you go from the 43 to the 33.
Yeah.
And now you're probably kicking a field goal.
Yeah. You're not running the last play.
And you probably are not getting Dan Lanning intentionally putting an extra man on the field. I mean, to me, it's not genius. I've never understood
people
this.
People are saying that it's genius because it put Ohio State in a position where when you ran the 12th guy on the field, it allowed you to double cover Smith and then also have one-on-one with everyone else, right? Obviously 12 guys on the field. And so you were preventing the big play by playing man over, which, to your point, by the way, was all night on Smith. That wasn't something new, but you were playing man over on Smith there. And then, so you prevent the big play, and you also ran off 4 seconds of game clock. So that's why people thought it was brilliant.
But it's not like the play prevented, because they never even looked at. Will never looked over there. Will Howard never looked over there. So my point is this. It's another Ryan Day disaster. That's what that play is. It's not brilliance out of Oregon or Dan Lanning. It's Ryan Day's football team not being prepared for a route. And I have to believe that they practice that. I don't know a football coach in my 20 years of covering the NFL and college football. I don't know a football coach who doesn't practice that exact scenario. And I understand it was not a designed run to have Will Howard go down the middle of the field. I totally understand that. You didn't have a go-to route combination. you didn't have a formation set up to get you a 10-yard out pattern. You need a double move, or you need the pick play to get a guy open. A rub route, whatever you want to call it. This was not Dan Lanning brilliance. And I'm sick and tired of hearing about how great Oregon was in that game. With all due respect, Ohio State lost the football game. Poor execution really all night long, if we're being totally honest. And I just think if that game is, if we look at it dollars to donuts in detail, I don't believe that Oregon was overwhelmingly a better football team than Ohio State.
Yeah,
I don't.
I don't think they were overwhelmingly better.
But that's what we're hearing, is that Oregon now is a better football team than Ohio State. And I'm sorry to tell you that's not the case. That's it. In my opinion, did Dan Lanning and his staff do a better job than Ryan Day and his staff? Yes, absolutely they did. Were they more prepared in their 2-minute and their 1-minute situational football? Yes, no question. It's always been a Ryan Day issue. And it didn't get better by adding Chip Kelly. It did not. That's where this game was won. You have in my opinion, you have a guy in Ryan Day who continues to tell you what he's not capable of doing in clutch moments. You got blown out in a national championship game against Alabama all those years ago now. Because what is this, his 8th year at Ohio State?
Something like that.
Was that 5 years ago now? This football program has sputtered under Ryan Day. You want to have that conversation, I'm here for it. What I'm not here for is how brilliant Dan Lanning is for either cheating and putting an extra man on the field and burning 4 seconds. What impact did that have on the last play? The confusion that people have is people think that it was a live, the clock was running. The clock was not running. The clock was stopped at 6 seconds. You were not prepared to run a play that would put you in field goal range and would take 4 seconds. You weren't prepared. You weren't ready. That's what this game came down to. And it happened all game long.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I...
Yeah,
that's how I feel about it.
I think that you're a little burned out on Dan Lanning, number one. I think number two...
I'm burned out on Dan Lanning being brilliant. You couldn't beat Washington last year. You not once, but twice. You couldn't beat Washington last year.
Mm-hmm.
What has Dan Lanning done? And I'm asking a serious question. What has Dan Lanning done that shows you he's brilliant, game-changing, amazing, holy cow? What has he done? He got beat by Kalen DeBoer last year. So I'm not the guy that isn't. I get it. If you're an Oregon fan, absolutely kneel and bob. Totally understand it. If you're objective and unemotional about it, what has Dan Lanning done that makes him this amazing, brilliant coach?
Yeah, I guess nothing. I don't know. I mean, I think he's in the conversation every year. I mean, he's, I guess he finds himself somewhere in the middle. He's not amongst the top like 3 coaches in the country, I guess, but I definitely have him as top 10 coach in the country, certainly.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm probably just burned out. Oregon fan is a really good football fan. And I generally believe that most fans you hear from are a vocal minority. Outside of Michigan, I think Michigan fans are deplorable and on the regular are disgusting. I think the defense of that whole thing. I think you look at Ohio State fan, Oregon fan, I think you have some really strong fan bases involved at the top of the college football world. The one thing I don't understand is the unwavering love and support of Dan Lanning, especially coming off of last year.
I think it's just an opinion-based thing, man. I think I'm not saying you're wrong. I don't disagree with the fact that it didn't it was more on that last play about Ohio State versus Oregon doing something. I agree with that. But I think people's opinions are that it was an amazing, this the word people were using was genius. That Dan Lanning is a genius for putting Ohio State basically in that position. It wasn't just that he saw the situation and decided to put the 12th guy on the field at the last second. Because that's the other thing that I think people aren't really talking about. Like typically in that penalty, 12 men on the field, it's usually just that you put one guy too many on the field on accident,
which is what I think happened. I don't believe for a second that this was intentional.
That's the difference then. Then that's the difference in your opinion.
I don't believe it was intentional.
People do think it was intentional, and Dan Lanning said it was intentional.
But what else is Dan Lanning going to say? Nah, we screwed up. He's not going to say that. He's not going to say that. I don't believe it. You're right. I'm probably on Dan Lanning burnout.
Yeah.
I think the guy was too scared to take the job at Alabama. I think the guy didn't have the courage to replace Nick Saban. And I think he was unable to beat Washington. And I think he had 12 guys on the field, and it worked out in his favor. In that, I think it gave his guys a little time. I would agree the only benefit they got was it stopped Ohio State from taking a deep shot there. But are you really trying to take a deep shot there?
Well, I mean, with 10 seconds left, it would have been nice for Ohio State to be able to take, I don't know about a deep shot to like the end zone, but it would have been nice to get like a 20, 25-yard chunk play there. That's what they were looking for. And I think that was, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. I'd love to hear what people think about this. I tend to lean towards, it wasn't a genius play. I think saying it was a genius play is pretty excessive. It's pretty over the top, but I do have to agree that whether we like the fact that it's only a 5-yard penalty or not is inconsequential. It's a 5-yard penalty. And Dan Lanning, if it was intentional, because I agree that's still up in the air regardless of what
nobody's given up 5 yards with 10 seconds left in the game.
So if his thought truly was, hey, I'm gonna just push a 12th guy onto the field, because that's what happened. The 12th guy, it's on the tape, you can see it. Hey, they're set. And then this 12th guy just kind of stumbles onto the field right off their sideline, obviously. So I don't know if it was intentional or not. If it was intentional, hey, cool. That strategy worked out for you. I would agree that we need to change that in college football. 12 men, needs to be a 15-yard penalty. And for those asking why it wasn't called before the snap, you're not going to call that before the snap because it's not a penalty before the snap. It's a penalty after the play starts.
Yeah.
So
I also think this was the only game of the year they had to win. I've said this all year long. Oregon has one of the easiest schedules in the country, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And if you look at the new Pac-12 members in the Big Ten, I mean, the only game you have to avoid really in the conference is Ohio State, and they wound up winning that game. Michigan is terrible this year. They're not a threat. You look at what's left on the schedule for him, it's Purdue, who's terrible. And that game is Saturday on Fox. Illinois at Michigan, Maryland at Wisconsin, and Washington. That was the only game of the year they had to win. He did his job. I'm not saying Dan Lanning's a bad football coach. I'm not going to sit here and call him a genius for having too many men on the field. So, how good do you think Oregon is?
I mean, at home, I think, they're probably the best team in the Big Ten. I mean, on the road, I don't think they're the best team. I truly believe it's that consequential. I think that Ohio State at home is probably 10 points better than Oregon, honestly. Like, I really do believe that. I think that the Ryan Day effect in big games is really hard to quantify, other than to just say they seemingly just can't win the big game. And I'm still, gonna die on the hill of, I love Will Howard, but you got to have more awareness in that situation. You got to be able to say to yourself as a quarterback, hey, there's 6 seconds left. If I don't have this out route, I got to throw this away. I can't run here. I got to throw it, because he had a window just to step up and throw it out of bounds. And I don't care if that would have been a 50 or 55 yarder. You're still kicking that football. Because if you don't, you're losing. You have
to try.
Game. Yeah.
You have to try. To me, it's more about Ryan Day not being a good enough operator.
Yeah.
That's what that game is. And I I'm not trying to take anything away from Oregon. I just am the hype over this. I think the biggest question coming out of this game is what the hell is wrong with Oklahoma that Dylan Gabriel's not there anymore?